So let's first look at, since we're solving, I just want you to take a look at all the graphs on the last page real fast. Because you'll have to solve it and then match it up with the graph. So you'll still have, as you can see, some that have some nice easy numbers, like the answers here are -3 and -2, right? So we've been getting those kind of answers for all our x-intercepts, all our roots. But then also, you can see right here, look at these two. What are the answers here? All right, they're decimals, right? On B, if you look at B carefully, it's not -5, it's not -6, it's somewhere in the middle. And that's why we need this last method, is because as much as we'd like it to happen, they don't always come out exactly at these nice whole numbers. So we have to know, what do you do if you can't factor it, you can't complete the square, so your answers must be decimals if there are any answers at all. So that's what we need this last method for, is, well, what if you have decimals? Okay? So now some of them, you don't. So let's just start easy on this formula. And I've been kind of working it so you guys are already familiar with this quadratic formula. It's pretty big, and it uses A, B, and C. And we've had two formulas that use A, B, and C. The quadratic formula just combines both of them. So here's the formula you'll have to commit to memory, but it's pretty familiar already. The first part is -b over 2a. Right? That's the vertex. So you already know that part. Okay? And then there's another part that you're already familiar with, and that is the discriminant. So we're actually going to combine the two formulas you've learned so far, combining them into one. B squared minus 4ac. So we'll do both formulas at the same time. Now, we're going to do one more thing with this, though. We're going to take the square root of it. And just like we did on the homework, right here, notice how we got one negative and one positive. So to make sure we get two answers from this formula, there's a special notation for that. And we just use a plus sign and a minus sign. And you just put them one on top of the other. That means plus or minus. So that way we remember to get both answers. Okay. Now, you're going to have to memorize this, so the first thing you want to do on each problem is probably write this down, just practice it and write it out. And after a while, don't look up here and copy it, but try to write it down from memory. Just remember it's the two formulas you've already known, and then add the square root and the plus or minus, and it'll come to you pretty quickly. Okay. So the number one mistake is usually you have the formula wrong, or you plug in A, B, and C wrong. After this, it's all arithmetic. It's actually order of operations. This formula has no algebra in it. It's just adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, taking the square root. Order of operations that you all learned in junior high. So keep it in mind. A lot of people do like this method because there's no algebra involved. So let's do the A, B, and C. Let's just say A is 1, because there's a 1 there if there's no number. And B is always the number with the x, so this is going to be -6. And C is going to be 8. And I'm just going to practice plugging everything in the right place. Notice the use of parentheses. Very good idea to use parentheses when you're plugging something in, because you don't want to miss any double negatives or stuff like that. So we have two B's. All right, B is here and B is here. So those two are both B's. So I'm going to put -6 for both of them. And we have two A's, an A here on the top and A on the bottom. So I'm going to put 1 for both of those. So we got 1 and 1. All right, and then I do have a C. There's only one C. So it's two A's, two B's, and then just one C. And that's at the very end. That's kind of easy to remember because C is usually at the end of the problem and it goes in at the end of the formula as well. Okay. All right, so as you can see, just numbers, square roots, and things like that. We just have to do our arithmetic correctly. calculator can help sometimes, and everything will be fine. So right here you can see there's a double negative, because remember it's negative b over 2a, so since b is negative, it's opposite. So we got 6 plus or minus square root. All right. And let's figure out what's the discriminant. Remember, that's the name for b squared minus 4ac. So negative 6 squared is 36. And then 4 times 1 times 8 is 32. So 36 minus 32 is 4. All right. And all divided by 2. Alright, let's just simplify the square root and just rewrite it. Instead of having square root of 4, let's just rewrite it with 2. So we have, go this way. So we have 4 plus or minus square root of 4, which is 2. And now we break it up just like we always have. Let's break it up to one with minus sign and one with plus sign, just like we did with completing the square. Get your 2 answers. All right, so we have a 6 minus 2 divided by 2. And we also have a 6 plus 2 divided by 2. So this new symbol is just a way of making sure we do both. You're not doing both at the same time, you just split them up into 2 pieces. Alright, so 6 minus 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my 2 x-intercepts are 2 and 4. Go look at the graph page and fix what letter has x-intercepts of 2 and 4. Is it C? Okay, so that's what you put down here. The matching graph is C. Remember, all this is to find, where it crosses the x-axis, the x-intercepts. Okay. No, you can't. Yeah, need it back. Okay, now, since we have some nice little numbers here, I want to remind you, because the next thing that we're going to be doing is looking at all the methods all together. If you get like 2 and 4, even if you get like a half and 7, you know, some either nice whole numbers or maybe a nice decimal, like a half is really easy to work with, that means you can factor this. So we could have gone through and done, okay, what multiplies to 8 and adds to negative 6, and what numbers work there? What 2 numbers multiply to 8 and add to negative 6? Negative 4, negative 2, there you go. And that means we could have just gone through and said, okay, x minus 4 and x minus 2 equals 0. So x equals 4 and x equals 2. Now, you tell me, which one was faster? So this is why we want to know how to do the quadratic formula, because of the decimal answers, because factoring wouldn't work. But let's not forget that, hey, it's easier, like when on the test, it's going to say solve. And you can pick any method you want. You want to know, like, should you go through all this work, do this big giant formula, A, B, C, and square roots and everything? Or would you rather just do what multiplies to 8 and adds to negative 6? So keep that in mind. You don't want to replace everything we've done so far with this formula because it is long. But because it's long, it always works. That's the nice thing about it, that even if the vertex form completing the square doesn't work, even if factoring doesn't work, the formula absolutely will every single time, no matter what. So just you got to balance those two. Okay? If you try to do quadratic formula on every problem on your test, you probably won't finish in the hour that you have to take it. So you have to negotiate, well, what formula should I use for what kind of problem? Okay? Let's look at number 3, right below. I'll do this one, then one more, then you guys can get to work. So see if you can write the formula down first without looking at it. Don't look at it. See if you can do it from memory, because that's one thing we want to get out of this. Okay, just remember it's two formulas you already know. So you could do the negative b over 2a. Right? And then it's the discriminant on top, b squared minus 4ac. And then you have to add in the square root sign, and then make sure we get two answers, put the plus or minus sign. So again, you already are very familiar with this formula. Alright, let's write out A, B, and C. So I'm going to have 8 for A, 5 for B, and 8 for C. Alright, let's plug everything in carefully. I like to write it with the parentheses just like I did above. If you make any mistakes here, it's probably not after you plug them all in, because that's just arithmetic and multiplying. You guys have been doing that forever. So if mistakes are either write the formula wrong or you plug in the numbers wrong. So just if you use the parentheses, you'll avoid any of those mistakes with double negatives and things like that get in the way, more algebraic problems. So let's plug in B first, because it's the first thing here. So both B's are 5. Put 5 here and 5 here. Write that a little more clearly. 5. There we go. And let's plug in that A, the two A's, the one on top, one on bottom. So we get 8 on top, 8 on the bottom. And the last number is C. The last place in the formula is C. So it's 8 as well. After this, 100% order of operations from a long time ago. Just have to be careful on our signs and things like that. So we got negative 5 plus or minus. Let's figure out the discriminant. And it's going to be all over 16. All divided by 16. So figure out what do we get for the discriminant on this one. I'll do the first part. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay. And what's 4 times 8 times 8? And I've been telling you that you probably need a calculator for in the future. That day has arrived. Minus 256. Okay. All right. And that comes out to be negative 231. All right. So our discriminant is negative. How many solutions are there? 0, right? There are no answers. How come? Now you could probably piece together, well, how come we were saying negative meant 0 answers? All right, because if you try to do the square root of a negative right here, you take a calculator and you put in 231 negative and hit square root, it's going to say invalid. You can't take a square root. So when we first learned discriminant, I told you just take my word on it. Negative means no solution. That's because we end up taking square roots of the discriminant. You can't take a square root of a negative, so you can't have an answer. So there's no solution for number 3. So we could have easily said instead, like, oh, that's going to be 25 minus 256. That's negative. Okay, therefore, no solution. Right? It doesn't really matter that it's negative 231. It could have been negative 117 or negative 1 itself. It's the fact that it's a negative number, and you can't take square roots of negatives yet. Okay, so no solutions. No solutions. Or we were saying 0 solutions before. Right? Same thing. But remember, that doesn't mean no graph. That just means no x-intercept. So looking at the graphs on the other page, which ones do not have x-intercepts? J, right? So if you look at, you can still graph it. So let's not say no solution means no graph possible. It just means right here, J, your graph does not cross the x-intercept. In other words, if this is something going up in the air, it never touches the ground at all. Okay? Okay, so let's put the graph for J. No solutions, but everything always has a graph. Don't mix up that. So we could do, if you're going to graph this, you could go through and find negative b over 2a which would be, you already have it kind of built in right here. So the x-coordinate of the vertex would be right here. -5/16 decimals. And we could plug that in and find out what the vertex is if we had to. Or you could do the vertex form and you'll get the same answer. It'll be ugly with fractions, but it's definitely possible. Alright, so let's go down to number 9. We've looked at a no solution. We looked at when we still have nice answers and you're able to factor it. But let's look at number 9. So you might, from number 1, you might look at that and say, well, I could factor it and probably get the answer faster. Let's try that first. All right, so on number 9, can you find two numbers that multiply to 2 and add to 6? Do any numbers work? All right, there's only two numbers that multiply to 2. That's 2 and 1. So can you get 6 from adding, subtracting 2 and 1? No. So it doesn't factor. So that's why we have to have this method. Not everything factors. It's prime. Prime doesn't mean no solution. Prime could mean no solution, but it could also mean decimal answers. So that's, we'll keep going, and we see we have a 1 for A, a 6 for B, a 2 for C. And once again, write out the formula without looking at the front. See if you can write down the formula right now, just as practice, so you know what it is. So x equals what? Go ahead and write it down on your paper. Give you a second. Let's go ahead and plug it in. We're going to have negative b, so 6 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, hard part's done. Seriously, if you make it this far and yours looks just like mine, you will not have a problem with quadratic formula, because the mistakes usually happen with not knowing the formula or just plugging in the wrong numbers or forgetting a negative or something. But if this is correct up to here, the rest is just arithmetic. So we have negative 6 plus or minus square root, figure out the discriminant, and that's going to be all divided by 2. So I usually just like to go up here and just kind of figure it out and then put it in. So 6 times 6 is 36, and 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. So 36 minus 8 is 28. So up to this point, you've always had those nice numbers in the radical, especially last night's homework and the night before that. It always came out to 16, 4, 1, 25, but that's not the case anymore because our answers are decimals. So you can kind of tell right here, since we don't have a perfect square, it's a decimal. Now, you can do one of two things. You can estimate this answer, because you know 28 is really close to 25. Square root of 25 is 5, so square root of 28 is like 5.2, 5.3, just as estimating. You can do that. Or use a calculator and just type in 28 square root button, and it tells us 5.29, and let's round to the nearest tenth, so let's do 5.3. But you're going to have to get that decimal one way or another. Okay? So if you know, oh, this is close to 25, which is 5, so a little higher, that's 5.2, 5.3. I wouldn't mark it wrong if you put 5.2, okay, because you're still estimating pretty close. But you're going to have some way of getting that decimal. Okay. Cover up the negative. There we go. And then we can go ahead and do our two answers. Negative 6 minus 5.3 divided by 2. And negative 6 plus 5.3 divided by 2. And again, calculator is kind of handy here. You can just punch everything in and get the answer relatively easily. So we got 5.3 6 negative minus 5.3 equals negative 11.3 divided by 2 equals negative 6.65. Right. And we could do the same thing just with a positive. So we got 6 plus 5.3 equals negative 0.7 divided by 2 is negative 0.35. Negative 35 hundredths. So definitely we wouldn't be able to get this from factoring. Oh, by the way, if we did factor, these are the two numbers, right? So going back to that original question, what two numbers multiply to 2 and add to negative 6? It's actually 5.65 and 0.35. Those add to negative 6, and I got to have the negatives on there. And if you multiply them, they'll multiply to 2. It's just we can't come up with these decimals in our head. That's why we need this method. Okay, so there are answers, just they're decimals. There's no way you could figure that out by trial and error. Okay, so what graph does this match up with? Which one is that? B. All right, and that's the one we looked at earlier. Yep, there's the negative 5.65. There's a negative 0.35. Okay. Okay, one last thing. I'm not going to solve anymore, but I just want to know how make sure you know how to set these up. Remember what I said about A, B, and C. So A is always in front of the x squared, B is always in front of the x, and C is always the number by itself. Okay, so look at number 8. Oh, no, sorry, look at number 7. What is A, what is B, and what is C on number 7? So we got negative 2. What's B? 0. And C is 5. So remember, the B is always with the x, kind of like the one next to it. See how there's an x here? That's B. It's not the first number is A, the second number is B. Don't do that. The number by itself, like 9, that's always C. And you can see 5 is a number by itself, so I know that's C. So again, if you make a mistake on quadratic formula, it could be you're plugging in the wrong number for A, B, and C because of something like this. Look at the front, lastly, on number 4. What's A, B, and C on number 4? A is 1, B is? What's B? Negative 6, right? C is 0. This time, the number that's missing is the number that's on the end. We have a number that's in front of the squared. We have a number in front of the x, so that's A and that's B, right? This time we have minus 6x. If this x wasn't here, negative 6 would have been C, but because the x is there, I know it's B. So just be careful when you're missing one of the numbers, so you make sure it's either A or B. I mean, sorry, either B or C. A is always there no matter what. Okay, you guys can work on this the rest of the period. Tomorrow, again, I said I will not be here.